We live on borrowed land. The ancestors of our ancestors evolved over soil that wasn't there perhaps millions of years before. The soil and trees having grown up only due to the inaction of the planet's real masters. We sit on the territory of beings far older and far more advanced than we could ever hope to be. Pray to the God Emperor that this planet's true masters don't awaken within your lifetime. Long story short, the crotchety old guy down the street has a Gauss cannon. Hello everyone, and welcome back to T-Girl Telepathica. Back to the grind of introducing you all to the next contender in the game for competitive war crimes, the Necrons. I figured that after all the time spent on Space Marines the past few weeks, I should really dedicate some time to talking about everybody else. So this month it'll be all Xenos for Pride. And who better to usher us into said month with the only faction with a toxic old man yaoi book. Starting off with the origins of the Bone Zone, the Necrons are 40k's answer to the necessity of having a necromancer faction in any fantasy setting. And goddamn do they pull it off well. They are one of the oldest races in the entire Warhammer universe, quite literally possibly predating even the oldest of the three Chaos Gods. They didn't always look like your grandpa with horrid scoliosis though. At one point they looked just like you with scoliosis, as well as cancer. The Necrons were once called the Necrontier, an extremely short-lived race, I think 30 or 40 years, coming from maybe one of the most irradiated balls of rock you can think of that can still support life. Because of their super short lives due to their constant cases of hypercancer, the Necrontier often worshipped death itself. They had always been extremely conscious of their mortality and occasionally saw it as a sweet release from the aforementioned hypercancer. But this didn't stop them from 1, not wanting to constantly fear death and have super cancer, and 2, advancing as a species. And slowly but surely over the generations, the Necrontier built up their spacefaring capabilities and went out to explore the stars, where they found some funny frog fellas in another ancient race, even more ancient than them, the Old Ones. Now, the Old Ones will most certainly need their own episode, as they're not only extremely important to 40k, but also fantasy, and as a result, AOS. But for now, all you need to know is these guys are fucking idiots, because despite them being a hyper-advanced magic frog people, when the Necrontier came to them begging for help, they just went low, lamau, and told them to sod off. Granted, this may have also been because the Necrontier who found them asked for immortality, but shut up and let me make fun of the frogs. Stupid or not, the result was the same. The Necrontier grew to resent the Old Ones and decided to have a war about it. This went about as well as shooting the sun would when the sun could get angry at you. The Old Ones unsurprisingly bodied the Necrontier, forcing them back and back until the reign of one Zarek of Silence fame. He was approached by a Catan, which was essentially to the physical world what the gods of chaos and lesser gods of the warp are to the warp. Not only did this Catan offer him the eternal life his people sought for from the Old Ones, but he promised also to help them kill all the Old Ones for their insolence. It's about now I should inform you that this man is named the Deceiver. Apparently with cancer so bad he couldn't see the red flag covering his entire view, Zarek quickly agreed. And he and his entire race were all dragged into these massive furnaces, stripped of their flesh and souls, and made into Skeleboy automata that we know and love today, all enslaved to the will of the Catan, in a process known as biotransference. And then the single most legendary comeback in existence happened. We don't know much about it, but it's called the War in Heaven, and the absolute smackdown the now Necrons were laying on the Old Ones was unstoppable. The Old Ones tried everything, making elves and throwing them at them, making orcs and throwing them at them as well, but too bad, so sad, they all got murdered to death and the Necrons conquered the galaxy. Should have seen that one coming with your precognition, dick! But ho! What's this? Treachery in the ranks! Zarek was afforded full autonomy, unlike his kin, and a perfect mind as a gift from the Catan for giving them the entire galaxy pretty much. Turns out the Catan are also stupid because the frame the War in Heaven was done, Zarek freed his people and started a war against the gods themselves. This was a much harder war, but the Necrons still bodied the Catan, shattering them and using them as generators for their funny scythe-like ships. Unfortunately for the Necrons though, successful as the second war to kill God was, they were severely weakened by this. And given that they had put their full attention towards, the actual gods they were fighting, the Eldar had started a momentum train that they didn't have the means to stop. So instead, Zarek decided the Necrons had to go into hiding and sleep their way into the future, letting all the other non-immortal races fight each other and die so they could awaken in a galaxy they could rule. So that's where Jack Skellington's ancestors came from, but as you can see, some guys look different from the other guys. What are these guys? Well, starting with the lowest rungs of the ladder, we've got the Necron Warriors. The Necron Warriors were anyone who didn't have an important title at the time of the biotransference, and as a result became the faceless nobodies of the Necron ranks. They have zero mind function at all, only acting on the programming their lords instill into them. They are little more than the skeletons of the race with some slight armor protecting the necks, holding a basic Gauss cannon, and they rarely break from this. Slightly up the rank, we have the lower ranking guards and specialist soldier ranks of the army. Here we find the Lich Guard, the Death Marks, and the Immortals, and such units as that. They have extremely limited mind function, little more than what's required to relay information and confirm the Lord's commands. They're much rarer than your average warrior, and thus are much more important and much more armored. They tend to directly defend the Necron Lords, being the phalanx keeping them safe at all times. Or in the case of the Death Marks, being individually acting specialist units that can warp through space and do assassin things, without going through the warp. Further up the rank than that, we have the first tier of Lord level people, the scientist wizards of the Necron ranks, the Cryptex. Being the first of the Necron ranks to have their full mental faculties, though still indeed incomplete, Cryptex are sort of their own army, being the ones who maintain the automata and vehicles the Necron use, and who tune and employ their absolutely insane weaponry. The different classes of Necron Cryptex can probably be listed in their own episode talking specifically about the Necron hierarchy of the Lords. Why don't you all let me know if you want to see that? In any case, these tend to make up the role of the mechanics and the wizards all at the same time for the Bone Fellas, as a funny thing about Necron science is it flat out is often entirely indistinguishable from magic. So why ever separate the two? And finally we have the Lords. These are the lawmakers, the dukes, the princes, the royals of all the dynasties, and their families and most trusted companions. Much like the Cryptex, they have nearly perfect mental copies of their minds, being able to have conversations, issue commands, enjoy things such as plays and entertainment, and have horrible existential crises. Given there are several different dynasties, the Necrons can often come to blows between themselves, and of course this is all because of the squabbling between these bureaucrats that make up the very highest echelon of Necron society. Politics, people. And with that, that's all the time we have for this video today. Hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a great Pride Month. I know it's scary out there right now, but we'll all be okay, I promise. I hope you all have a good day, and thanks for watching.